So, what's your name?
My name is Sam Crick.
How do you spell that?
C-R-I-C-K. It's like cricket, but without the E-T.
So, what do you do?
So, I do a lot of things. I'm excited about sport, excited about education. My job is, I'm a salesperson for 8billion Ideas, and my job is to connect with school leaders around the world and inspire their students through entrepreneurship and the programs that we have at 8billion Ideas.
So, how do you approach school leaders when you're looking to sell your company?
Sure. So the first thing that we do is use different types of networking. So we could do this at conferences. So we go and attend education conferences, and this brings together leaders from around the world and gives them an opportunity to learn more about 8billion Ideas. So that's one route in conferences. Equally, we might reach out to them on LinkedIn. So the biggest professional networking platform in the world, LinkedIn is one of the best tools for prospecting. So trying to find out who your customers are and reaching out to them and messaging them. Alternatively, we also use recommendations. So once we've done a project with a particular school, like for example this school, we would then go to other schools and use that recommendation or use that reference to build up a new connection. So there are 3 ways that we engage schools for the first time.
Cool. And so when you engage the school, how do you persuade the school to allow you to influence the students and bring your company into the environment?
Sure. So it's not the easiest job in the world. Schools are incredibly busy places, and what we want to do at 8billion Ideas is very relationship focused. So we would focus on building the relationship first. In any sales role, you're always selling to people. Now, that might seem odd because you're technically selling to a school, and the school would be paying for that. But you are actually, the decision maker, the person that you're speaking to. You need to build up that connection, that relationship. So relationship is at the very heart, but also it's the problem that you're solving. So we don't impose a solution on a school. We wouldn't say, look, you need to buy this program or your students need to do this program. We would try and understand what problems they have in the school, or challenges. We like to reframe it as challenges. And so we would dive into a number of challenges that the school has, whether it's not enough work experience provision, or perhaps looking at student well-being, or even some a lack of understanding for careers. And then we would dive into different conversations around those particular topics, and then we would pitch a solution to that. But you have to listen to the customer first, and you have to ask them good questions so that you can understand what might be the best fit.
So my mum is a saleswoman, and she also runs her business.
Amazing.
And I've done some sales work working to hand out flyers to people passing by our kiosk. We're a boat company, so we work directly with people looking to have fun. And what I've ended up doing is just telling the people what we have, like what the boat does. It goes here, you can do this, this, and this. But I'm struggling to connect to the person.
Mm-hmm.
So as a salesman, how do you do that effectively to make sure that your product gives the person what the person wants and you get the person to use your product?
Yeah, so firstly, Liam, there's big similarities between our role and what you're doing for your mum, but equally there's big differences. I mean, the first similarity that I see is that you have to connect with people. That's the same for both of us. You have a product to sell. That's the same for both of us. And you're able to solve a problem for people. I think that's the same for both of us. Now, I think what's really different about our two roles is that your time frame to sell that is very short. People are walking past, can be quite difficult to get their attention, so you're always competing for people's time and their attention. Now, there's two ways I would say that you can go down that route. Either you can really focus on what that pitch is that you're giving and make sure that that is the best pitch that they've ever heard and know your product inside and out. But I would argue that that's more of like a product push. I would say that one of the other ways of looking at it is if you want to connect with that person, you need to put yourselves in their shoes. So they're walking past you I assume by the marina. It's usually where you find the boats. And if they're walking past, then they're obviously doing something with their day. They're not at work. They're not. It depends. So you could almost ask them that first question of, "What are you guys up to today?" And by doing that, you start looking at some of the hooks which you talked about earlier, which is, do they have the time to engage in your product? Do they have the time to actually invest in that? Because money may not be the biggest challenge for them, how much it costs or what it is, but it's actually, do they have the time to do that project? So I would say the first thing to do is either really craft that 15-second pitch so that you can sort of walk with them and then give that pitch, or ask them a question that throws them off a bit. What are you guys doing today? Or a random one that I use in my interviews is, what did you have for breakfast? It sort of confuses people. Another one could be, if you were to introduce yourself, I could say that my name is Sam with an S, and they would sort of be confused because that's sort of the only way that you spell it. I'm Liam with an L, and they go, yeah, that's how you spell it. Just little things that sort of get their attention, and it makes you come across as a real person rather than someone sort of reading off a script.
So what was your career path? Like, you've said that you're a salesman and you've done interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you, what's your story?
My story. So I was a student at a sixth form in the UK, and I was always passionate about sport, and that was my real passion, but also through my dad's influence I was passionate about business. He's got his own coffee van business, and so I've been working on the van quite a lot, built up a lot of personal skills, but for me my journey started at the end of school in sixth form when a gentleman called David Harkin came into our school, talked about starting his business and raising finance, and that got me excited. And so I spoke to him afterwards, and about a year and a half later, having gone to university and dropped out, I got back in touch with David, and he offered me a job with 8 billion Ideas. So that was around 3.5 years ago, and my athletics podcast sort of started around 6 months into my 8 billion Ideas journey, because I was learning about entrepreneurship, and I thought, I've got a message to share. Let's just go out and test that as soon as I could. So with the podcast, the first thing that I did wasn't to invest loads of money or raise money to build a professional studio. It was literally sit down with my stepbrother, record on voice notes on my phone, and just have a conversation, sort of like we're doing now.
So what did you learn while you were podcasting?
I learned it was really hard. That's the first thing I learned. I learned that it was very difficult to pick out certain things that would interest the other person and get them talking more. Often some people will answer questions in quite a short way. Obviously I like talking, so I answer them in a slightly long way, but unless you ask really good questions, you're not going to get really good answers. And so I think with podcasting, it was less about talking all the time and more about asking a great question, which in fact is pretty much what sales is. It's asking great questions and getting better answers.
So how did your what you learned from sales connect with what you learned from podcasting, or as you were going into podcasting? No, you went into sales second, right?
Sales first, and then podcasting. But I had experience of interviewing beforehand. But yeah, I guess how did one help the other? I think that in any scenario you're selling, I mean, I was approaching GB athletes and Olympians, so people that had been to the Olympics, had a massive following on Instagram and social media, and it's really difficult. I think the hardest thing is that you have to reach out to them and seem appealing yourself. So if you don't have that stack of proof, as we spoke about before, people can sort of go, who's this guy? You know, I'm not going to speak to him. So you're almost doing a bit of a sales pitch and getting the athlete to come on your podcast. So that's how sales sort of links into podcasting, but podcasting links into sales because you have even more conversations to fall back on, so that if you're looking to build a relationship with someone and they mention that they're really into running, or they live in a certain area of the UK, I can then go, oh, I interviewed X, Y, and Z from this person, from this place, or they do this sport, and you can build a connection there. So vice versa, a lot of it is sort of come together and worked quite well, yeah.
So I'm very interested in what you were saying in our assembly earlier about going off books, and when you meet someone, you're searching for these things that they'll find interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm also very interested in psychology. So I'm curious, first of all, do you get into the psychology of this sort of connecting with people?
So I don't go deep into psychology in terms of full research, do academic studies and papers myself, but I listen to a lot of podcasts around that psychology, especially for marketing, so that helps. So I know a little bit, but by the sounds of it, you're deep into it.
Not that deep.
Okay. Going deep.
Yeah. So could you tell me more about how you pardon me. Tell me more about how you go off these hooks and you find things that people are very interested in.
Yeah, of course. So for me, there's, if you don't know where to start, there's a simple place that you can start, and it's to have 4 things to talk about and 4 possible hooks. So whenever I introduce myself, I will say that I will say my name, I will say where I'm from, I'd say one of my passions, and then an interesting fact about me. Now, what that does is it allows the other person, you're almost throwing hooks out there. You're almost encouraging someone to ask you a question about something else, and then you can start to learn a bit more about themselves. Equally, if you weren't the one to introduce yourself first, you could ask the person, what's your name, what's your story, and tell me something interesting about yourself. Now, depending on which situation you're in, I don't think that that's too outrageous to ask, and it will help you learn more than just their name, and perhaps it just learns a little bit more about them.
Cool. And how do you practice that? So if I'm kind of like a challenge, I want to see how good I can get at interviewing and how good I can get at connecting this way. So obviously the best way to do it is do more interviews, but how else can I pursue that? How else do I improve my skills in connecting to people in this way?
Yeah, so firstly, I think you're on a great path because you're the only person that's stepped into the room today, which makes you stand out straight away and says a lot about you. There's a lot of that I did as well, which has helped, and I think you've got to keep putting yourself out there, even when it feels a little bit uncomfortable. The best way is to master something is by practicing and doing, and that is either when you're pitching your ideas for your boat event, that is just going up to people and with very little fear, which is obviously an easier thing to say than to do. But yeah, what do you think you can do? more of, or perhaps change to build the confidence further?
I could try and go up to people in my community and try and sell my boat to them. I think it could come off as a bit weird, so I'm trying to. Is there any way that I could do that more economically, or?
Yeah. So the first thing is you need to understand if we're talking specifically about how to. So tell me a little bit more about this boat event. So yeah, tell me about.
We own a boat business and we charter boats out to people.
Mm-hmm.
We do all sort of events. You organise the event and we give you the boat, take you out, get the decorations, that sort of stuff. So birthday parties, weddings, fishing, going out for fun.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think the first thing that with anything of how to market or sell your product is knowing your customer. And what's really interesting is that you started with some of the features of the boat and actually started about yourself. Now, I don't think that's a particular issue, but actually if you flip that conversation that we've just had round and you say that we create the best experience for birthday parties, for weddings, for these other events, for fishing, then you start to throw some hooks out very, very early on. And so you can come to the fact that you own the boat company later down the line if it's necessary, but you're basically pinpointing what you do against someone's interests. So start with the thing that's going to inspire them or get them thinking about, oh, how could I use this boat, rather than what the boat is, so to speak. If you were to say that we had a 25-foot yacht, then that's not. I think that by attaching some emotion to it, saying we're going to create the best wedding party or birthday party for you, next weekend on a 25-foot yacht, that's going to be better than we've got a 25-foot yacht.
Awesome.
Nice. So what's your next steps from our conversation here? What's your plan?
So the reason why I'm so interested in psychology is because it allows me to connect with people, make friends easier, build a deep social connection and a deep social network, and so how do I use sales techniques and sort of what I can learn from that, what you've learned from that, to connect with people, not only to make a sale,
Mm-hmm.
but also to form a relationship with them and form a friendship.
Yeah. Well, I think firstly that should be at the heart. That the relationship and the connection should be first, because the only reason that you're ever going to sell anything is if you have that connection. So often the intention is to solve the problem for your customer, but not always to sell your product. So sometimes you can solve problems without selling your product, and that's going to add value to your customer. So sometimes you might have a situation where you're going above and beyond for that client, which isn't, they're not paying for, so to speak. If you had someone that came for a birthday and they had they hadn't got a birthday cake and they booked out your yacht and your boat, that added value would be the birthday cake, or perhaps that you printed off a photo of them when they were younger and you put it on the birthday cake, whatever, these little ideas. This is like perceived value, which it's real value, but often it's the small things that sort of attach to an emotion that actually help to build the relationship further. So, if what's the difference? Let's take this as an example. Would it be more beneficial to the customer to have a yacht that's 5 foot bigger, or to have a birthday cake with their name on it?
Birthday cake.
And what's more cost effective?
The bigger yacht.
No, the birthday cake. Because in terms of how much it costs, you're probably going to spend a little bit more on the bigger yacht. So it's looking at also how you can take your product, add value to it, but at no extra cost to you apart from maybe your time. And maybe a little bit of expense, but not massively.
So more effective.
Yeah, and what I think you've got to think of the end result for your customer. When they go to their friends after they've had a great experience, what do they talk about? Because the likelihood is when if let's say I've got a friend James who's just had a birthday and he's had it on your yacht, and I've said, James, how was that yacht company that you used with Liam? And how was the yacht company? And he said, Liam was a great seller, and got us a birthday cake with our name on it. Is he going to say about the birthday cake, or is he going to say about the size of the yacht? Probably not. So it's the important details to the customer, and perhaps not what we initially think, because we initially think, I'm going to sell via features rather than via experience and emotion.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good man. Well done. Very good.
That was a good interview.
It was. I agree. Yeah, great work.
You've definitely